There is a new Messianic Jewish Haggadah out. It is the Budoff Haggadah. Now, there are six things I really like about this Haggadah. But first, before I share those with you, I just want to clarify that this is not a paid review, but I did receive copies of the Haggadah 2 years ago to be part of the beta testing phase for it, which was a lot of fun and gave some feedback and some notes on it. And I know the creator of the Haggadah, Rabbi Kirk Glebe. He is doing some really, really great stuff. The Budoff Haggadah is part of the larger Budoff series, named after the late Rabbi Barry Budoff of blessed memory. Rabbi Budoff created the first edition of the Budoff Siddur in 1999. Then Rabbi Glebe helped him with the Machzor and second and third editions of the Siddur. So I really enjoy the Siddur as well as part of my growing rotation of Siddurim that I use for prayers. And then Rabbi Glebe, he also created the Budoff Bencher, which is what my family uses every week for Shabbat. It's really great. And now the Budoff Haggadah. And Rabbi Glebe, he created the Bencher and the Haggadah based on some conversations and notes with Rabbi Budoff. And I'll show you guys a PDF version in a second to show you examples of some of these. I'll walk you through the Haggadah and show you some of the illustrations, which I'll talk about. But the six things I really like are: one, it is very traditional and very Yeshua centered. So it's very traditional in that it includes things that other Messianic Haggadahs don't. So it includes the stories of the four sons, so not just the four questions, but the four sons, the rabbis of Bnei Barak. It includes Birkat Hamazon, the blessings after the meal. It includes fun, more traditional songs like Echad Mi Yodea, Echad Gadya, and Adirhu, which are a lot of fun to sing and to learn. And then on top of that, not only does it have those very traditional elements, but it's also very Yeshua centered. So it has a retelling of the Last Supper. The full account of the Last Supper in Matthew 26 is in here. It includes passages from 1 Corinthians after the third cup, the cup of redemption. And it ends not only with next year in Jerusalem, but come Lord Messiah Yeshua speedily in our days. So I really love that. It's very traditional and very Yeshua centered. Two, it has very beautiful illustrations based off of illustrations from medieval Haggadot. So I'll share images closer on the PDF. I'll create a slideshow for you guys. But the illustrations that are on the cover and all throughout are based off of medieval Haggadot from 700 years ago. It can be as old as 700 years ago, which is really, really cool. It gives instructions, including halakhic instructions for what to do if the Seder falls on Shabbat, for example, or on Havdalah, and it includes those blessings or the modifications to the blessings when those things happen, which is really nice. Fourth, it labels an efficient Seder. So at the bottom of these pages, you'll see a little matzah icon. And if it has the matzah icon, then that's a necessary part of the Seder. You really shouldn't skip it. But if you want to go a little faster or you don't want to go too late into the night, if you don't see the little matzah icon at the bottom of the page, then you can skip that page and not miss a key element of the Seder. So I thought that was really, really good and really nice for people with a lot of kids. Five, it makes very reasonable connections between Yeshua's Passover meal, the Last Supper, and the later Passover Seder. So in the Messianic Jewish community, while we are very good at noticing a lot of really exciting connections between Yeshua and what we read in the New Testament and Jewish tradition, sometimes we get a little overzealous. We overstate things a little too much. We could get a little too caught up in the excitement of it all and overstate our claim when it comes to some connections between what Yeshua did in the first century and then later Jewish tradition. The Passover meal is something that can happen with. So what I really appreciate about the Budoff Haggadah is that it is very historically minded. It is very sober in the claims that it makes about the connections we can make between Yeshua's Last Supper, Passover meal in the first century, and the kinds of Seders that developed later in Jewish tradition. And so it actually gives a really nice account that really lines up with my own research of what we can know about first century Passover meals. Six, it presents very informative comments in the footnotes about historical context of Seder elements and traditions and things that we can know is very much worth adding to your collection and picking up a few of them. So you can get this. They're available at messianicjewish.net. I'll put a link in the description of the video and of the podcast. And I believe there's even a 50% discount for orders of 5 or more. Again, I don't get anything out of this. It's not my discount code or anything, anything like that. But I just want to let you guys know about this Haggadah before Pesach comes upon us. It's a great one to check out. But I want to give you guys a little bit of a closer look. So let's peek inside. I have a PDF that I'll scroll through and show you guys a closer look of what's inside of the Haggadah. So if you're on the podcast, you'll probably want to jump to the YouTube link if you want to see, especially the illustrations of the Haggadah that I think alone make the Haggadah worth getting. And yeah, so let's go ahead and take a look inside. All right, so here is the Haggadah itself. We see the awesome cover. This is my favorite illustration of all the illustrations. So if you're listening on the podcast, we see Moses and the Israelites going through the Red Sea, and there's these really nice blue waves going across the page. And kind of behind the waves, submerged underneath the waves, you see the Egyptians and a horse and some fish and dolphins, and it's a really nice photo. And this is based off of the Golden Haggadah, which was created in the 1320s. We'll revisit this, but I just wanted you guys to get a close look at this cover that I think is really cool. So here is the table of contents. We see that they're going to give an introduction to Passover. Then there's preparing for Passover, so the Bedikat Chametz, which is nice. They provide the blessings for that. The Seder. So then you have the Magid, the retelling of the Passover story. Then you have the eating the Passover foods. Then here you see remembering the death of our Passover lamb, the Afikomen and Messiah Yeshua's body. So like I said, very traditional and very Yeshua-centered. Birkat Hamazon, remembering the death of our Passover lamb, the third cup in Messiah Yeshua's blood. Then we have Hallel and the conclusion of the Seder, additional blessings and songs, a bibliography, which is cool for further research into Haggadot, and then backgrounds of the illustrations and the medieval Haggadot that inspired all the images that you see, all the illustrations that you see inside the Haggadah. So that's the table of contents. So I just want to take you through a little bit of it and show you some of the features. You'll see highlights, but those highlights aren't on the real Haggadah. This just so I know where to stop and what to read to show you guys. All right, so here in the introduction, we see kind of the mentality that they take and the way that they discuss first century versus later Passover traditions, which I think is very historically minded and appropriate and the right way to be talking about these things. So they say the development of the Passover traditions that we follow as Jewish people are not as clearly understood, nor are quite as old as many think. Seder means order, Haggadah means story, and the holiday of Passover, as celebrated today, with its procedures, narrative, foods, customs, and songs, are mostly recent developments since the Middle Ages, so the 5th to 15th centuries of the Common Era. So, of course, the Haggadah acknowledges the overlap of later Jewish tradition and what we see in the Last Supper, of course, things like reclining, things like the ceremonial wine, but it does not overstate the similarities. I believe down here we will see. Right, so here's a comment on just generally what we can know about Second Temple time period, first century Passover meals. They say few details remain in surviving Second Temple period literature about how the Jewish people celebrated Passover. The scriptures and other Jewish literature written before 100 CE, like Jubilees, Philo, and Josephus, convey the joyfulness of the celebration, the sacrifice of the lamb on the 14th of Nisan in the afternoon, in the mandatory eating of the roasted lamb after sundown in Jerusalem, while in groups of at least 10, the drinking of wine and the eating of matzah, bitter herbs, and possibly charoset as part of the celebratory meal, and the singing of the Hallel psalms at the temple by the Levitical priests. However, no specific order for the meal is clearly given in any of these texts. The Brit Chadashah, the New Testament, references to Passover mention most of these elements as well. So, of course, it acknowledges what we can definitely know of overlap between what we see in Yeshua's first century Passover meal and later Passover Seder tradition, but it does not overstate what we do know. It goes on to say Yeshua's last Passover with his Talmudim seemed to assume an existing order to their meal, but no specific order is clearly presented. So maybe they had a specific order, but we just don't know what that order really was in its fullness. As presented in the Gospels, we get bits and pieces, we get the highlights, but we don't necessarily have the whole order. A clear order is found only after the temple's destruction in the rabbinic literature of the late 2nd century CE in the Mishnah and Tosefta, which, of course, is true. Then he explains the importance of the Jewish tradition of observing Passover at the table with your family. And he concludes this paragraph by saying, it strengthened both the faith and identity of the Jewish people as they sought to live on as God's chosen people without their land and without their traditional religious center. So Jewish tradition is so potent and powerful, especially in the diaspora, because that really is what forms Jewish identity outside of the land and outside of even more ancient and traditional religious practices such as the temple. So some more details about this particular Haggadah itself. They say it follows the traditional format and customs of the Ashkenazi Jewish community, reflecting our own family's European Jewish backgrounds. Some sections of text have been edited to shorten the length of the Haggadah. In a few places, we have added unique elements from non-Ashkenazi traditions that seem to be older than our own, and that shed light on the mindset of those who originally set in motion the development of the Seder meal. Nevertheless, it is our hope that all members of the Jewish community, regardless of their family background, will find the Budoff Haggadah to be both meaningful and useful for their own Seder. So my wife and I, we definitely found this to be true, very meaningful and very useful. It's very instructional. It's very good even though it has a lot more material than other Messianic Haggadahs, it also includes a lot of instruction of how to go through that material. So it's really not a burden or overburdensome to get over that learning curve of doing a more traditional Seder. So the introduction goes on to say, this Messianic Jewish Haggadah also reflects our faith in the Messiah of Israel, Yeshua. As a result, some traditional blessing statements and portions of texts have been slightly amended, and we have added text from the Brit Chadashah. It is very Yeshua-centered. Then he says, even with these additions, you will find that we have still maintained the traditional flow of the Haggadah, which I really appreciate. I find this to be generally true, that we can acknowledge and celebrate Yeshua within the traditional flow of Jewish tradition. Very rarely do we really need to amend it or modify too much. So then they explain their hope in this last paragraph of the introduction. It is our hope that this Haggadah will both remind us as Jewish people of our national and historic journey from Egypt to freedom and encourage us as individual Jews in our own personal and spiritual journey from sin to freedom through faith in our ultimate Passover Lamb, Messiah, Yeshua. So I really appreciate this goal, this aim, this dual aim of growing and reinforcing both Jewish identity and faith in Yeshua in formation of a coherent Messianic Jewish identity. And I think going through the Seder in this way is a great way to accomplish that very important goal. So I just want to show you a few more things. So there's the matzah icon if you want a shorter Seder. It has Hebrew, it has transliteration, and it has the English translation for, I believe, everything. All right, so this is one of the examples of the halakhic instruction and information that I find really nice. So here in the footnotes about Kiddush, the first cup, the cup of sanctification, it says occasionally Passover will begin on Friday evening, so on Shabbat, and as such, both the celebration of Passover and the Shabbat must be set apart. To do so, there is a Kiddush unique to each that is recited at the beginning of the Passover Seder. However, if Passover begins on Saturday or on any other day of the week, only the Kiddush for the Passover is recited. So you get that instruction. Then you see up here in the blessing in parentheses that there is the added Shabbat Veshel to the blessing to do when the Seder falls on Friday evening, which is really, really great that they make those, that they provided those features for us. And then here are some of the instructions I talked about, very clear. On Friday night, begin here, lift the first cup. So this is Kiddush, and it's the full Kiddush. It's not just the Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. It has the longer paragraphs before and after that. So that is really nice for those who want to do that, and it has all the Shabbat insertions. So that is really, really wonderful. And then also here is the Havdalah insertion for when you're doing your Seder on Saturday night, which is this year. So we'll be able to use it this year. So this is a place where they do make a really cool connection. So this is right after Urchatz, so the washing of hands, the one without the blessing, the first washing. In a footnote, it says, it is quite probable that it was at this very early part of the Passover Seder where Messiah Yeshua washed the feet of his Talmudim, the disciples, as recorded in John 13. So I also think that's a really cool moment in John of the washing of the feet, and that is when we wash our hands. And we can remember Messiah Yeshua's servant leadership in that moment that we read about in John. But notice the phrasing here. It is quite probable. I really appreciate that. It's unafraid to make the connection and to point out the meaningful connections, but it is just very reasonable and sober-minded in just how confident we can state some of these historically claimed. So it is quite probable that it is at this very early part of the Seder where Yeshua washed feet. So here's one of the more traditional elements that they added, which is the rabbis of Bnei Barak, which is a fun story. And we see an illustration here that is from an older Haggadah. I really like this illustration. It's a really good one. The 5 rabbis here, they're going through the Passover Seder and they're retelling the story of the Exodus, and they just do a really long and deep dive into the Megid. And it took so long that dawn approached and their students came and they're like, guys, it's about time to recite Shema for Shacharit. And then I'll read from it here. It says, when he realized what time it is, Rabbi Eleazar ben Azariah said, I am 70 years old and I still didn't understand why the story of the coming out of Egypt is to be told at night until Ben Zoma explained it. We are told that we are to remember the day of our going out from Egypt all the days of our life. He said, the days of your life should be understood to mean only the days. However, all the days of your life includes the nights as well. Another explanation is this. The days of your life refers to this world only, but all the days of your life includes the time of Messiah as well. So I really like that story and that they include that. All right, then we get to Tzafun, where we do the Apikomen. And here are some inclusions from the Brit Chadashah. So the leader would say, in taking the matzah, he gave the blessing, broke it, and said, this is my body, which is being broken for you. As often as you do this in remembrance of me. So, of course, that is from the Gospels. And it gives the instruction, recite the following blessing, remembering Messiah Yeshua's sacrifice as our ultimate Passover lamb. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us by his commandments, has commanded us to remember the bread of life, our Messiah Yeshua. And then you eat the Afikomen. Then here is 1 Corinthians 11, at the lifting of the third cup, the cup of redemption, which says, in the same way, Yeshua took also the cup after the meal, saying, this cup is the new covenant in my blood. This do as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim our master's death until he returns. And then you do the wine blessing, and then the blessing for remembering Messiah Yeshua. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has commanded us to remember the covenant blood of our Messiah Yeshua. Then it instructs, drink the third cup, reclining to the left, while soberly reflecting on Messiah Yeshua's death, providing the atonement for your sin. Amen. Provides this note at the bottom. The third cup taken after the meal is traditionally taken at the conclusion of Birkat HaMazon. This is common in Jewish tradition. What is unusual is that there is evidence that in late Second Temple period tradition, additional readings related to the Passover sacrifice were added to the normal blessings. And it is possible that these additional readings more clearly related to the understanding of redemption. As we discussed earlier, a total of 4 specific cups are drunk, which traditionally have their meaning given from the text of Exodus 6:6-8, representing the 4 expressions of deliverance promised by God. I will bring you out, I will deliver, I will redeem, and I will take. It is possible that it was within this context that Messiah Yeshua referred to this cup after the meal when he spoke of the sacrifice of his blood as inaugurating the new covenant promised by God in Jeremiah 31:31-34. We just don't know for sure because there is not enough remaining clear textual evidence. At Passover, all of us as Jews will drink a third cup following the meal and after the taking of the Afikomen. As Jewish followers of Messiah Yeshua, let us drink this third cup in celebration of our remembrance of our ultimate Passover lamb, Messiah Yeshua. He willingly allowed himself to be killed. He willingly allowed his blood to be shed as our atoning sacrifice. By putting our faith in his death, we receive forgiveness for our sins, and as a result, peace with God. Amen. It's a gospel message right there in the footnotes, while also, again, being very clear and sober-minded about the historical claims that we can make. Really can't go wrong with any of this. I love it. All right, then here at the end of the Seder, first we say Lashana Haba'a b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, and we say Bo na Adon Yeshua HaMashiach b'mheira b'yameinu, which means, come Lord Messiah Yeshua speedily in our days. And then it instructs, if this is second night of Seder, continue by beginning the Omer count on the next page. So that's really nice. It includes the counting of the Omer blessing. And then here are some songs. That's transliteration of Dayenu. Here's Adirhu. Also has transliteration and the English and the Hebrew. Here's Echad Mi Yodea, Hebrew, transliteration, and the English. And then we get all 3 for Haggadah as well. And here are the notes on the illustrations used in this Haggadah. So now let's take a closer look at some of the illustrations in the Budoff Haggadah. I won't show you all of them. You got to get it to look at all of them. But we'll take a look at a few. So here is the cover image. And we see that it was inspired by a portion of the Golden Haggadah, which was created in Spain in the 1320s, which I think looks really cool. And then here we have from the Lombard, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, Haggadah, which is from Italy in 1390. I think this is like 700 years ago. The cover of the Golden Haggadah is 1320. That's literally 700 years ago. It's so cool. And I call this one Carpus Boy for obvious reasons. But this was created in Italy in 1390. Then this one's kind of unique, right? So this is from the Barcelona Haggadah, which was created in 1340. And yeah, you should be asking, like, what is going on here? There's a rabbit with a cape on with a stick on the head of a dog. And then there's a kind of a pig looking creature with a cloak on and a big chalice. Like, what's going on here? So luckily, the Haggadah includes an explanation for this. So back on page 78, it has this explanation for the Barcelona Haggadah's illustration here. It says, created in one of the largest Jewish communities in Europe at the time, this Haggadah boasts rich pictorial scenes depicting Passover rituals and intriguing animals surrounding very large, legible Hebrew text. This is one of many Haggadot that uses symbolism of the hare hunt, a common illustration in European manuscripts. Knowing well what it means to be hunted down, Jewish communities often resonated with the hare. Yet the Barcelona Haggadah offers an inversion of the traditional hunting scene. Here, the dog submits to a regal, standing hare. I think that is really interesting and really cool. So the Jewish people identifying with the victim of a hare hunt, the hare itself, are illustrating in the Passover Seder, in the Passover Haggadah, that the dog is submitting to the hare, and the hare is surviving the hunt. Very appropriate for Israel surviving the chasing down by the Egyptians and Pharaoh. I'm not sure what to make of the pig, though. All right, so then the next one. You'll see that some of these images are very intriguing. If that one wasn't enough, look at this one. I call this one the baby man. So we see what appears to be a fully grown man very much enjoying his Seder with his feet propped up and his wine glass out, looking for more wine. But he has this like baby face. I think that's really funny and a really cool illustration. This is from the Darmstadt Haggadah from Denmark in 1769. All right, then here we have one of my favorites. I believe I pointed it out earlier. This is the rabbis from B'nai Barak illustration. Unfortunately, I'm not sure which Haggadah this comes from, but I wanted to show you guys the image and the image of what inspired it. I think the illustrator did a very good job. And I'll finally admit, I'm a little biased in favor of the illustrator. But even if I wasn't biased, I'd really like these illustrations. All right, so the last one, another very intriguing one, is from the Bird's Head Haggadah, which is from Germany in 1300, so over 700 years ago. So again, this is kind of a bizarre image, but it's really fun. It's really memorable. It is people with birds' heads that are preparing what appears to be the matzot, I believe. But there is also an explanation, kind of an explanation. It says the name refers to the unusual bird-like heads given to all Jewish men, women, and children featured. While several other Jewish manuscripts from this time period also contain bird heads, the reason is unknown. So it remains a mystery, but it is very much in keeping with Jewish tradition to contain these bird's head. For those who enjoy the bird heads, a child-friendly pop-up version is available from Koren Publishers. So Koren produced what I'm sure is a very beautiful bird's head Haggadah. So we're in good company, including some bird's head illustrations in our Messianic Jewish Haggadah. So I really hope you guys learned something from this and that you guys are motivated to pick up the Budoff Haggadah. Oh, and actually, I meant to do this earlier, but it's similar in size and feel to the Art Scroll Haggadah. So just for reference. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this review, this endorsement. So there will be a link in the description to order a bunch of the Budoff Haggadahs. Again, I don't get anything from this, but I just really enjoy and appreciate and really like this Haggadah, and I want you guys to enjoy it as well. I think it's a really great addition and contribution to Messianic Jewish liturgy and ritual and publications. So hope you enjoyed this video. If you learned anything new, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And I look forward to seeing you next time.